Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. Today I'd like to talk about something very interesting, and it's based on a recent book that I bought. It's called The Happiness Hypothesis by Jonathan Haidt, and I just wanted to kind of discuss a few very interesting ideas today about how our mind works. And essentially our mind and our body, they're independent. And St. Paul, for example, said that we have a spirit and a flesh. Plato said that we have a mind and the body. So the mind is like our rational thinking, and the body is more so what we want to do, the impulses, our emotions, etc. And Freud divided it into the id, the ego, and the superego. So the id is what we want to do, our pleasures, our desires, our instincts. The ego is our rational self, and the superego is like what you're supposed to do. So he gave an example of a person riding a horse, like a Victorian horse, for example, and the horse is like the id. So the horse wants to do a certain thing of its pleasures, etc. You are the rider, so you're the ego, you're controlling that horse. And let's say there's your father right behind you telling you what you're supposed to do. That's the superego. So that's kind of the model he's giving in the book. And so he gave this analogy of a rider controlling a horse, or even an elephant, for example. So the elephant would be the id, and the rider would be the ego, the rational mind, thinking. And so the mind is the rider, and the body is like the elephant, for example, based on the Plato's model. And he gave an example about how we have these independent functions in the mind. We have, for example, a left and right part of the brain, with the left part being independent, and it's being responsible for these weird confabulation things in the person with split brain experiments. So he said people who have a epilepsy or seizures, and their left and right parts of the brain are not communicated with each other because the corpus callosum has been severed. Or what happens with these people is that they get essentially these things called confabulations, where it's because of the left side of the brain just makes up things. And that's pretty interesting because that shows us that we have independence in different parts of the brain. Also, our brain got bigger over time, with the limbic system surrounding our forebrain, and then the neocortex that's more complex, like planning, thinking, and problem solving. So our brain expanded over the course of evolution. And also we have these controlled and automatic thoughts. Automatic are like the quick thoughts, they're reliable, quick, and they're based on emotions. Where the controlled system is more like the rational thinking, and the controlled system is more like the advisor. So we have this emotional thinking and more of this rational. So the emotional is always the quick decision, it's faster, and it's much more powerful. So the horse or the elephant are much more powerful than the rider, and they will do whatever they want. You can think of it. And the rider is like the rational mind, which is not as powerful. In fact, the elephant is 6 times more powerful than the rider. So you're no match for it. So trying to win it is not a good idea. And the whole purpose of this book is trying to retrain our the horse or the elephant. You don't want to win over it. You don't want to argue against it. So essentially, this is what it is. We have the elephant, which is the emotional system, and we have the rider, which is the rational system that plans, problem solves, evaluates alternatives, analyzes pros and cons. And so the rider can try to lead or drag it, but if the horse or elephant disagree, they will always win. They're more powerful. You're no match for it. So moral reasoning coming from the rider only comes after the gut feelings and intuition. So we tend to support our emotions. We're like an advisor for the elephant, or even its lawyer, supporting it with arguments. So it is hard to win it. We can just help guide it if it chooses to listen or support it. And that's the idea. If we have a negative impulse that we want to change, we don't want to win over it. We simply want, he gives a few things that we can do in this book, but essentially we can try changing the environment so it's not so tempting to do something, or we can do something else that's also pleasurable, kind of to distract the impulse so that it doesn't do this pleasurable thing that's not good for us, but to do something else as a distraction. But essentially the key idea is to not try to win over the elephant, but really try to train it. And so he gives 3 ways that you can do it. And what he says is that life is the way we experience life is by interpreting events. And so the idea is how you react to things. And so you don't want to be so reactive and react negatively to things, but you want to be more kind of like proactive. And we learned about this idea many times already. But essentially life is what you deem of it. And so you want to train the elephant. And there's 3 ways that he proposes. The first is meditation, which is more of an Eastern approach, where you reduce your attachment to materialistic desires by simply sitting and focusing on your breath to kind of change these automatic desires and tendencies by simply becoming aware of them and changing them so that they don't cause negative, so that they don't lead you in negative directions. It also allows you to be more calm and more accepting of situations, solve problems better. It's almost like a magic pill, and it works by retraining the id. Okay? And of course there's a lot of great things of meditations, like emotional resilience, empathy, trust, self-esteem, etc., and better cognition as well. So meditation works by training our id, or retraining our id, so that it doesn't lead us to negative directions, so it doesn't cause negative emotions like anxiety, fear, etc. So it works by training the id by simply focusing and identifying the negative emotions or the negative desires that you're experiencing. The second type of approach, which is a more Western approach proposed by Aaron Beck in the 1960s, is cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. And this involves challenging negative automatic thoughts so we can tame the elephant. Again, we want to retrain that elephant. So we are kind of challenging our negative thoughts. So we want to identify them, and then we want to retrain them. So it's about finding alternative and more realistic ways of thinking through changing how we interpret the events, right? And we want to change thoughts because they influence our emotions and our behaviors. Thoughts, from thoughts come your emotions and your behaviors. So you want to influence the thoughts to also change your behaviors. And this approach also involves homework, which is done daily, such as engaging in tasks like making your bed, making breakfast, to break out of that vicious cycle of negative thoughts causing negative emotions, etc. So, and then the last thing is Prozac, for example, which is an SSRI, which is shown as effective as CBT, but only works when you're actually taking it. So choose whatever works for you, but of course CBT is much more sustainable and long-term than taking pills like Prozac. So this is interesting because these approaches, especially meditation and CBT, work on changing the elephant and changing the negative desires and thoughts which you may experience.